Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for May 8th, 2018. On today's show, we're going to be talking about the latest film and TV news. This is Slash Film's senior writer, Ben Pearson, and joining me on the podcast today are managing editor Jacob Hall.
Hello, hello.
And writers Hoai, Tran,
Hey, everyone.
and Chris Evangelista.
Hi.
So let's kick off today's show by talking about something that could make Disney not happy, and that would be Comcast might have a new deal in place to sort of supersede the deal that we all thought was locked in for Disney to acquire 20th Century Fox. Chris, tell us about what's going on.
So Comcast has been trying to purchase most of 20th century, or I guess it's 21st Century Fox now, for a while. Even before the Disney deal, quote unquote, went through. We all, like you said, we all thought this was a done deal, but now there's a new hiccup. So Comcast is now planning to offer a $60 billion all cash bid for Fox, which would outbid Disney's $52 billion. So there's a lot of moving parts here. They're waiting on the government to rule on a case involving AT&T trying to acquire Time Warner. There's a chance that the government's going to shoot that down as sort of being having to do with antitrust laws. And if that happens, Comcast will likely back away from the deal. But if the AT&T deal goes through, Comcast is going to try and make this happen. There's no guarantee Disney will go for it, and this doesn't necessarily mean the Disney deal is dead. And Fox has tried to outbid Disney before, and in fact, they actually did outbid Disney in the past. But Disney offered this sort of incentive saying, even if the deal falls through, we're still going to give you $2.5 billion, which Comcast did not offer. So, again, we don't really know what's going on here. Nothing is really set in stone yet, but this is just yet another moving part to this constantly evolving story about billionaires throwing money at each other.
I have one very important question for you, Chris. Does this mean that there's a possibility of an X-Men Minions crossover?
I hope so. That's all that matters. So we'll have to wait and see.
See, what I'm hoping for is a Fast and Furious and Fantastic Four crossover.
Yeah, Universal doesn't really have very many superheroes. I think we talked about that when we were initially talking about that first bid that Comcast put through. So, Chris, in your research for this article, did you come across whether or not the Disney Fox deal is hanging in the balance and waiting on this AT&T Time Warner thing as well? I know that's like the big one that's sort of on the forefront, and it's actually in the courts right now, and there's like the decision is going to be made on that merger way faster than anything else. But is there anything that indicates that the Disney Fox deal might not go through if the AT&T Time Warner one doesn't?
Not really. It seems like that really is still happening, but again, it just seems like every other week or month something new pops up about this deal that makes it sound like it's not as cut and dry as we all thought it was. Not that it was cut and dry to begin with, but
Right.
it just seems like they're constantly working behind the scenes to finalize everything.
So do we have any timetable on when we might know something concrete here?
Well, the Time Warner AT&T ruling is coming next month, so in June. So once that ruling comes, we're going to know for sure if Comcast is moving ahead or not. So probably by next month we'll know at least if the whole Comcast thing is happening.
Okay, sounds good. Let's move on to our next item, and that is Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter are officially reuniting the band for Bill and Ted 3. HT, tell us what's happening.
Wild Stallions is coming back together, everyone. So Bill and Ted 3 is officially confirmed to be in development, which is going to be titled Bill and Ted Face the Music. And this is a long-in-work sequel that will essentially be released almost 30 years after the last film, which was Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey in 1991. And Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter are both confirmed to return and reprise their roles as the titular Bill and Ted, or Ted Theodore Logan and Bill Preston Esquire, respectively. So this will take place as they're sort of grappling with middle age and yearning to recapture the days of their youth. Keanu Reeves has recently teased too that not only will they be attempting to save the future and save the world, they will be trying to save the universe at this point, and maybe rocking out to some heavy metal while they're at it.
Awesome. So I think we talked about the possibility of this movie on this podcast. What is the difference now in terms of like where this film is in development versus the last time we talked about it?
Well, it wasn't quite confirmed yet, but this is just the official confirmation, essentially. And yeah, the creators and screenwriters have been sort of teasing this for the past couple of months now. Chris Matheson and Ed Solomon have been teasing the screenplay, which they have both penned, and Dean Parasot has been confirmed to direct. And so this is just kind of like the final nail. I don't want to say nail in the coffin. The final sort of like thumbs
Step
up.
in the
that
ladder.
This is
Step in
happening.
the ladder. It's going up instead of going underground.
Yes, exactly. This is a thing that's finally happening, and it's just exciting because they've been talking about this for like almost a decade now, but now it's actually moving forward, and they announced this at Cannes, so it's like given that the other sheen of like officiality.
Yeah.
Can I ask everybody a question real
Yes.
quick? Sorry, Ben. I said this to you guys as shock earlier today, but I haven't seen any of the Bill or Ted movies. I'm sorry, I haven't seen any of the Bill and Ted movies. Is this a good idea? I mean, does this feel like a natural extension of those first two movies? Does this feel like warranted, or does it feel like just a desperate nostalgia grab? I'm curious how it feels from the outset here.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of these movies either. I really need to remedy that, especially before.
What?
I know.
Jesus.
Oh my God. Well, I've always thought that this series is just so ridiculous and over the top that it's not about like whether it warrants a sequel, it's just whether we deserve a sequel. I feel like whenever the movie I've only seen the first one, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, but I love it so much and have rewatched it, I don't know, 1,000 times. So I just feel like it would be really nice to see these sort of two stoner idiots who may have to save the universe every now and then just return and remind us to be excellent to each other. It's just like it's the feeling and the atmosphere that they give and like the kind of ridiculous shenanigans that they get involved with. And while this one seems to like deal with some more serious issues like grappling with family and kids, I do think it'll be a nice return to that just pure joy that the first movies gave us.
Chris, what do you think? You've seen both of these, right?
Yes, I'm very excited for this because the original Bill and the first two Bill and Ted was about young guys. I mean they're originally teenagers in the first one. I think they're a little bit older in the sequel, and that sort of like dumb folly of youth when you can afford to be just stupid all the time because you're young. And the idea of seeing those two idiots as adults now dealing with bigger responsibilities, that seems really intriguing to me. And also just on a personal level, Keanu Reeves, who I love Keanu Reeves as an actor, but he spent the bulk of his career playing very serious, dour characters, sort of trying to break out of his old dummy mode that he was primarily known as when he started his career. So I'm really interested in seeing him lighten up a bit and do a comedy again, because he hasn't really done a goofy comedy like this in a long time. So just on that level, I'm very excited to see this.
I just want to see Keanu Reeves smile again. He's always been so brooding lately. I feel like I just want to see him crack a smile.
Well, some casting news that made me smile when I read about this earlier today is that Burt Reynolds, Kurt Russell, and a bunch of other actors are actually in talks to join Quentin Tarantino's new film. Chris, tell us about this.
Yeah, so Quentin Tarantino's new movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it's no doubt going to be a controversial movie. But at the very least, no matter how the film turns out, it's going to have a very good cast. We already know that Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio are starring in the film, and we know that Margot Robbie is in talks to join the film. And now Burt Reynolds, Kurt Russell, Tim Roth, and Michael Madsen are also all in talks to join the film. We don't really know who Kurt Russell, Tim Roth, or Michael Madsen will be playing. It says they're playing small roles, but Burt Reynolds is in talks to play a real person named George Spann, who was the guy. He was a rancher who rented his land to Charles Manson and his cult. And so Charles Manson and his cult lived on this guy's land, and they planned a lot of their murders on this land too. So this tells us a few things. It tells us that it seems like Charles Manson really is going to be a character in the film. I had read several conflicting reports indicating that Charles Manson may not even actually be in the movie. He'd just be sort of mentioned. But it seems like if they're going to have this guy who rented Charles Manson his land a character in the film, that really suggests to me at least that Charles Manson is an actual character in this film. I don't know how big a character he's going to be, but we'll see.
It's interesting. George Spahn, if you listen to Karina Longworth, you must remember this podcast. You may be familiar with him because he was a big character in her series on the Manson family murders and the Hollywood connections between them. And the whole Spahn Ranch thing is fascinating because it was this old Western town, essentially used to film Westerns in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, those falling in disrepair. So this incredibly modern, bloodthirsty cult was living in this old man's Western town while they plotted. And if this sounds fascinating to you, I'd recommend looking up You Must Remember This, Karina Longworth's Hollywood podcast. But also, one of our writers is doing a big piece about Spahn Ranch and what this means for this movie. So look for that this week on /film.com.
Awesome. And the idea of Kurt Russell, Tim Roth, and Michael Madsen all coming on board this as well, it sort of feels like it feels like a family reunion almost for Tarantino. It's like he's pulling together everyone he's ever worked with and grabbing a couple new stars as well. You've got DiCaprio and Brad Pitt starring in this thing. I think Margot Robbie's like one of the only people mentioned in the cast that he has not worked with yet, but Russell, Roth, and Madsen all worked with him multiple times, most recently all three of them together in The Hateful Eight, so that's kind of an exciting group of people getting together. HT, are you excited about this one?
Yeah, I'm excited. I feel like I'm not quite as excited as I've been for past Tarantino movies, but I still will probably go see it like first opening night.
Mm-hmm. Jacob, do you think, and God help me for even suggesting this, but as Chris mentioned, the idea of Charles Manson maybe actually appearing in this movie, do you think they're going to cast somebody like Jared Leto or somebody to play like Charles Manson?
Please no. Oh, gosh.
I would actually hope one of two things. I would hope Tarantino casts a nobody to sort of highlight how this random figure destroyed so many lives. So
that is a great idea.
All the people we love are played by like movie stars, where the guy who destroys their lives is just some guy. Or I hope they keep him off screen entirely. And we explore the people in his orbit, because if we're seeing Spahn Ranch, then we're seeing like the people who are rotating around him, unaware that there's this unstable molecule in their community. So I'm wondering if maybe the focus here will be less on Manson at all and more on the people who are just being dragged around him unknowing.
Interesting. All right, so let's talk about Laika, the stop motion, or Laika? I think Laika is how you pronounce it. Laika, the stop motion I guess production studio. I'm not sure exactly what their official designation is, but they make stop motion movies. They've made films like The Box Trolls and Kubo and the Two Strings. They have announced their new movie's title and the full cast, it sounds like. HT, tell us about this.
Yeah, so Laika's fifth feature film is called Missing Link, and it's a sort of fantasy adventure movie about an investigator of mythical creatures who embarks on a journey to find the legendary missing link to mankind's primitive ancestry. Laika announced this film as well as the cast that's led by Hugh Jackman, Zoe Saldana, Zach Galifianakis, Stephen Fry, and Emma Thompson. So it's one of Laika hasn't made a lot of films, but every one of their films that they've done are really great. Like you said, Box Trolls, Kubo and the Two Strings, Coraline. And it seems like this one could probably hit that standard as well, because it sounds like it's a really magical sounding film. It follows Jackman as this intrepid investigator named Sir Lionel Frost, who seeks to prove his peers wrong by finding the one legendary creature that has never been found, the missing link. And he does find it. Mr. Link is portrayed by Zach Galifianakis, and they attempt to go on a journey to find the rest of his kind, and they're joined by Zoe Saldana's adventurer in their long quest. So it seems like a kooky and fantastical movie that will be beautiful as the rest of their films are.
Here's my question for...
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Ben. My question is, last time we talked about, like, I'm not sure if it was on the show, but it was on the site for sure, and that was, we heard that Annapurna, the Megan Ellison's company, was going to distribute Missing Link, although we didn't know it was called that at the time. And it was interesting news because there have been reports for a few years that Laika has been in trouble because their movies have not been big moneymakers. They've been critical darlings, but they haven't done, Disney, DreamWorks, or Pixar money. So I'm wondering if anyone has any thoughts on this movie being distributed as an Annapurna movie. Does this mean it's a different kind of movie? Does it mean it's going to be Laika doing their own thing? Does anybody have any thoughts on this new model for them?
I don't know if Annapurna will particularly affect their production model. Laika has always been quite meticulous with their productions. They've taken years to work on the films just because the nature of stop motion animation is so tedious. But Annapurna, for their distribution model, I don't get the this is just like me speculating. I don't think that they will affect their output as much, hopefully. But it would be really unfortunate if they did, because I feel like Laika and then also Aardman Animations are sort of single-handedly keeping stop motion animation alive, just because the technique is so tedious, like I said before, and it would be a shame if Laika changed its model in any way.
Yeah, and I think when I wrote about the initial that teaming up with Annapurna, I found this old quote from Travis Knight, who is like the CEO of Laika, and he said in 2016 when Kubo and the Two Strings came out, he was doing some press for that movie, and somebody asked him about the next film that the studio was going to be making, which is now we know is called Missing Link, and they asked him, how that film is going to be tonally compared to the stuff that Laika had done already, and I think he said, his quote was, "It's going to be completely different from what we've done before. The thing that excites me is that I know that the handful of films that we've got coming down the road, they're so totally different from what we've done. The film following the next one, it's so unusual and so interesting." So it sounds like they're really looking to evolve from a storytelling perspective as well. So yeah, I sort of hope they keep that style alive, because Kubo was just so gorgeous the way that stop motion came together. And movies like Paranorman I find kind of aesthetically ugly, but Kubo was just like so smooth, and the way that film it seemed to slide across the screen instead of being really choppy like the other ones sort of seemed to be. But
yeah, they changed their style for Kubo a little bit too, because they modeled it off of Japanese origami in a way, so that's why it looks slightly different from their past work. So I get the feeling that they may try to change it up again with this film, and maybe try to test some new animation technique or push the boundaries yet again.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on to Sherlock Holmes 3. This is a project that has been rumored and then, bounced back and forth. Like, is this going to happen? Is it not going to happen? But now it actually has a release date. Jacob, tell us about that.
Yes, after literally a decade of hearing about Sherlock Holmes 3, or close to a decade at this point, it's been revealed that Sherlock Holmes 3, probably not the final title, will be released December 25th, 2020. When that happens, it would have been 9 years since the previous film, Sherlock Holmes: A Game of Shadows. And in my memory, I remember Game of Shadows being a disappointment at the box office. But looking at the numbers now, it made more internationally than the first Sherlock Holmes from 2009. But it made a little bit less at the domestic box office. But it just cost more, which is why maybe I thought that. But it still made enough money, made over $500 million worldwide, that there's still interest in seeing Rob Downey Jr. and Jude Law play Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. And I guess my question, and I'll open up the floor in a second, is this too late for Sherlock Holmes? I mean, I like these movies just fine. I've read all the original Sherlock Holmes short stories and novels. I'm a big fan of those on paper. And even with that snobbery in mind, I still enjoy the first two fine. I just wonder if maybe it's too late, if waiting a decade to get number 3 in the pipeline means that do people care about this version of Holmes and Watson anymore, especially since we have a comedy version of these characters coming with Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly, and we also have Sherlock on the BBC, which had its own dedicated following in a very different style. So how about you guys? Like, is 2020 too late for this movie? 'Cause I'm thinking it may be.
Chris, what do you think?
I think so. I mean, personally, I don't like these movies, and I'm always baffled that they have a following. But yeah, it does seem like that ship has sailed. But maybe, I don't know. 2020. Anytime I hear the year 2020, it sounds like the distant future, even though it's really not. I can't even imagine being alive by then. So I don't really know if anyone is going to be interested in Sherlock Holmes in 2020, but I guess we'll see.
I'm sort of conflicted about this because I like the first movie and I found Game of Shadows to be sort of wearing thin already, and that came out only a couple years after the first one did. So, the big wait does have me a little worried, but at the same time, it's like if Bill and Ted is going to come back and it's been since 1991, like it's not like Downey and Jude Law are, some bums. Like they're basically just become bigger stars with every passing year. So I liked their chemistry in those movies, even though I didn't really care that much for the second film. I don't know if so yeah, part of me is thinking it might be a little bit too late, but there's another part that's like I'm interested in seeing those guys together again. And I think the article that we have about this says that Guy Ritchie, the guy who directed the first two movies in this series, is not confirmed to come back yet, and that might be the key thing for me. If Guy Ritchie doesn't come back, then I think I'll be even more interested because we sort of know what his aesthetic is for this particular franchise. So maybe if they got some fresh blood in behind the camera and used that same pair of charismatic actors, maybe that would be enough to sort of reignite some sort of vigor for this franchise. HT, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm not really itching for Sherlock Holmes 3, but I wonder if this is kind of speculation for Avengers 4, I guess. People will be looking for another Robert Downey Jr. franchise to sort of see him again on screen if our theories hold correct on whether he will appear again in the MCU. Mm-hmm. They could just jump onto Sherlock Holmes 3 because, like, Robert Downey Jr. has a great following. He's a big star. People will go see movies for him. And if he won't be appearing in the other big franchise that he's part of anymore, then people might just go to Sherlock Holmes 3 to get their Robert Downey Jr. fix.
Yeah, and I think
it should be noted that by 2020, Jude Law will also be in the MCU because of Captain Marvel. So
I forgot about that.
Oh yeah, that's right.
People may want their MCU reunions.
Man, yeah, I forgot all about that. And I was going to say that Downey is supposed to be developing a Dr. Dolittle movie that may or may not beat Sherlock Holmes 3 to theaters. So that could be like another potential franchise starter for him where people could get their fill of Downey if he does indeed bite the dust in Avengers 4. But yeah, we'll have to see how that goes. Let's move on to our last news story of the day, and that is John Krasinski has teased a Quiet Place sequel. He's talked a little bit more about that, and he is teaming up with Aaron Sorkin to revive a project that was once thought dead. Chris, tell us about this.
Oh, yeah, so John Krasinski, he did an interview with Deadline, and it's actually kind of a refreshing interview because he flat out says he's really surprised anyone even wants a sequel because he thought the first film stood on its own, the first A Quiet Place, but it was a big hit, and, Paramount wants that sequel, so he's thinking about it. He's not confirmed yet to direct it, but he has a few quotes. I'm not going to read them exactly, but basically what he boils it down to is what he's interested in A Quiet Place sequel is telling different people's stories. So in other words, instead of focusing on the characters we saw in A Quiet Place, it would focus on characters elsewhere surviving while all the stuff that happened in A Quiet Place is going on. I guess it's sort of like how Fear the Walking Dead is sort of the same story as The Walking Dead told from different characters. So that's sort of what he seems to be going for here. And then the other thing is a few years ago, he was developing a series with HBO about the Chateau Marmont in Hollywood, which is this famous hotel where movie stars always stay. And he was developing that with Aaron Sorkin, and it sort of fell through. Nothing really happened with it. But I guess now that he's become this big mover and shaker thanks to the success of A Quiet Place, that's back on at HBO. So he and Aaron Sorkin are going to do that again.
Yeah, I was very interested in that project when it first popped up in 2011 because, we didn't know the extent of Krasinski's directorial talents at this point, but just the idea of the Chateau Marmont, it's always this sort of mythical place almost. Like there's so much that's happened there in Hollywood history, and that was supposed to be what the original idea for this show was going to be about. I think it was based on a book called Life at the Marmont, and it was all about the idea of telling the history of Hollywood through the decades using this hotel as the epicenter of that. So I'm glad to hear that that Krasinski has acquired enough cultural cachet and enough power, enough juice in the industry to be able to get this passion project back up off the ground. I think at the time he was talking about being involved, I think, behind the camera as well as acting in a role in it. I don't know if that's changed. It's been many years since this was talked about, so I'm sort of hoping we get a chance to see this one. Jacob, what do you think?
I think it's a great premise. I think it's a great setup for a show. And I'm really excited in another way because they're basing this show on an upcoming book written by Sean Levy, who, full disclosure, I've met in a film festival line years ago. He used to be he's a film journalist, and he wrote a excellent biography about Robert De Niro. So I'm thrilled that this is coming to show. This is a great premise, but I'm also thrilled that a really good writer's work is being adapted for HBO.
Very cool. And yeah, Aaron Sorkin and Krasinski, that's a cool team up. Krasinski he's sort of made a habit of teaming up with a lot of big name people. I think he worked with George Clooney early on in his career, and then he co-wrote the script for Promised Land with Oscar winner Matt Damon. So he's working with another Oscar winning writer at this time. What do you guys think about A Quiet Place 2? I think we've probably talked about this on the show before, but I'm just interested now that we're a little bit, we've got some distance between us and the premiere of that movie. Now that we've all had some time to sort of think about it a little bit. Chris, actually, have you had a chance to see it in theaters? I know you're waiting for audiences to sort of to get out of your way so you could see it in peace.
I have not. I'm going to try. I think this weekend I will finally go see it, and hopefully no one will be there. And I swear to God, if I sit down and people come in, I'm leaving. I'm just going to walk right out.
I'm just going to pay somebody.
Everyone will probably.
I was just going to say, I'm going to pay somebody to come in and sit right next to you in the empty theater.
Yeah,
you should be fine. Everyone will be seeing Infinity War for the third time.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping, but we'll see.
So Jacob and HT, what do you guys think about A Quiet Place 2? Does this that concept, does that interest you at all? It sort of reminds me of like the original talk that was going around about a potential Cloverfield sequel right in the immediate wake of that first movie, where they were talking about how cool it would be to see some other group of characters with a video camera who happen to like pass the group of characters from the first film on a bridge or something, and you see them just for a split second, but the whole movie follows their adventures during the same monster invasion kind of thing. What do you guys think about A Quiet Place 2?
I think a different cast of characters is the way to go, because the story told with the original cast, it feels complete. I don't need to see what happens next. I don't need to see what happened beforehand. That movie is like airtight in terms of where it takes its characters. And I'm torn because I think Quiet Place is a really, really cool thing because it is an original movie that it just ends. It has a very definitive ending. Right. But at the same time, I'm also a person who gets masochistic and excited about 11 Hellraiser movies and about how every horror franchise out there, the bigger the numbers get, the more excited I get to punish myself with how increasingly terrible they get. So part of me is like saying, yes, bring on A Quiet Place 5, 6, and 7 so I can see how bad it can get. But,
God, that is masochistic.
But we'll see. I kind of quietly hope that they maybe take the same team and say, hey, make an original horror movie. Do something else that makes as much money because people are excited by the premise and the cast, not because it has a number in the title.
Yeah, HT, what do you think?
I'm not against it, actually. I mean, I felt like it was kind of inevitable because every successful low-budget horror film or mid-budget horror film spawns at least 3 or 4 sequels and or a popular franchise. But I feel like this today, Hollywood has gotten better at sort of franchising their horror series. You see, like The Purge or The Conjuring movies are all really good on their own. So I think that A Quiet Place has a strong enough premise that it could spawn like several good films with different casts, different stories, taking place in different areas that could be like really good.
Yeah, I'm excited about this as well. I agree with Jacob that it definitely has a definitive ending, and I'm definitely interested to see how this plays out, because I wonder if they're gonna go the route of like actually having some sort of technical crossover with it, or if it's just going to be implied. I think Krasinski in this interview was talking about the characters that you see in the first movie where the family lights a fire at the top of their roof, and you sort of see some of those other fires in the distance, like wondering what those people are up to, and if they're actually going to cross over with the family that we see in the first movie, or if they're just going to leave that out in the distance or what. So we'll have to see how that goes. But we'll keep you guys posted when we hear more. And that's going to bring us to the end of today's episode of Slash Film Daily. Where can we find more of your work online? Jacob, let's start with you.
I'm on Slash Film every single day, and I'm on Twitter where I'm at Jacob S. Hall.
HT?
You can find me also at slashfilm.com, and I'm on Twitter at HTranBuoy.
Chris?
I'm also at Slash Film. I'm on Twitter at Evangelista413.
And you can find me at slashfilm.com as well. I am on Twitter at Ben Pearson. And you can find more about all the stories we mentioned on today's show at slashfilm.com and linked in the show notes for today's episode. Slash Film Daily is published every weekday, bringing you the most exciting news from the world of movies and TV, as well as deep dives into the great features you can find at the site. You can subscribe to Slash Film Daily on iTunes, Google Play, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please feel free to send your feedback, questions, comments, and concerns to us at peter@slashfilm.com. And if you do, leave your name and general geographic location in case we mention your email on the air. And don't forget also to rate and review the podcast on iTunes. That really helps us out in terms of visibility. Tell your friends about the show, spread the word any way you can. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.